welcome to The Kill File, your favorite true crime podcast. I'm your host, Brittany, and each week we will explore the dark corners of true crime, unsolved mysteries, and murder. Join me as we uncover secrets, investigate evidence, and dive into the chilling details of some of the most fascinating cases. Get ready for a journey into the dark unknown, because in The Kill File, nothing stays buried forever. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of The Kill File. I am so excited that you guys are here to hang with me again and get to share our interest in true crime. If you guys made it back here today, that means you made it through the first episode, and woof, that was a little rough. I apologize about that. I am learning. I'm new to this. It will get better, I promise. Today's episode is particularly brutal and heavy with assault, murder, animal murder, and sexual assault. So just a heads up warning for anyone who needs it. This episode is going to be rough. Today we're going to talk about a woman who has been described as the woman Hannibal Lecter, Katherine Knight. Heard of her? Yeah, I hadn't. So here we go. Katherine was born on October 24th in 1955 in Tenterfield, New South Wales in Australia. Also, Australia, if you're listening, I am so sorry if I butchered that name. I did my best. Katherine apparently has a twin, which I found interesting. Katherine's mother, whose name was Barbara Ruffin, was married to a man named Jack Ruffin, and she was already a mother of 4 boys. However, when she got pregnant with Katherine, she had an affair with a man named Ken Knight. Apparently, Barbara was actually introduced to Ken through her current husband, Jack, because him and Ken worked together. It was said that when Barbara and Ken's affair had come out, it upset and rocked their, quote, conservative rural town. I hate that word, rural. Whoever decided that that should be a word should be fired. So Katherine's childhood was said to not be great. Her father was a violent alcoholic who would sexually assault her mother multiple times a day. I guess her mother, Barbara, would tell her daughters intimate details of her sex life and how much she hated men and sex. I don't think that can be good to tell your daughters at a young age, but okay. Later in life, it was said that Katherine would complain to her mother that one of her partners wanted to do a sex act that she did not want to do, and Barbara told her, quote, put up with it and stop complaining. To me, that's terrible advice to give anyone, let alone your daughter. And I'm here to tell you that just because there's someone out there that probably needs to hear this, if you are ever uncomfortable with a sexual act that your partner is asking of you, you do not have to do it. You should be able to tell and share your feelings with your partner, and you shouldn't feel pressured to do anything that you're not comfortable with. It's your body and your choice. Period. Katherine also claimed that she herself was sexually assaulted by a few members of her family until the age of 11. This would later be corroborated by family members that this was indeed true. It didn't specifically say if it was her father or anything, which made me curious, like who'd been assaulting her, since it had said several family members had done it. That made me curious, like why was that never addressed when she was younger? That's like super sad. Besides her twin, Katherine was allegedly not close to any family members, with the exception of one uncle named Oscar. Oscar was, I guess, a champion horseman, and he committed suicide in 1969, and this absolutely devastated Katherine. She maintains that his quote-unquote ghost still visits her. Do you believe in ghosts? Katherine was known to be a bully in school who was said to have absolutely terrorized smaller children. She apparently assaulted at least one kid at school, a boy, and herself was injured once by a teacher who had apparently acted in self-defense. I couldn't find any details on how the teacher hurt her acting in self-defense or what Katherine did to the teacher, but I was super curious and I couldn't find it anywhere, so interesting. Then on the other side of her behavior spectrum, it said besides those fits of anger, she was a model student and was often awarded for her great behavior. It's just too bad to me that mental health wasn't known much about back then, because I feel like today, if there was a girl who was mostly a model student and just like flew into these anger fits, it might be like a red flag to some of the teachers that she may have some problems going on at home, and maybe they could have gotten her some help, especially as a child. It makes me wonder if this would have had a vastly different ending. Like, do you think so? Because I feel like when kids get help now, they can, work on things, they get tools under their belt. But we just see this story so many times in true crime where they started off as a kid, they had some issues, and then it just snowballs. That's just my opinion, though. So I guess Katherine never learned how to read or write. So at the age of 15, she quit school and started to work in a clothing factory. I'm sorry, what were they teaching her in school? How was it that she did not know how to write? I was just so curious. What was she doing all day in school if it wasn't learning how to read or write? I digress. Approximately 1 year after starting the clothing factory, she landed her quote-unquote dream job. She worked at a local slaughterhouse where her job was to cut out the internal organs of animals. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but if you are on the newer side of true crime, you may not. For those of you who have been in it for a while, you probably have heard this time and time again. But many stories about serial killers or killers in general begin with kids who abuse or torture animals. It's a huge red flag. So I wonder if she had done anything when she was younger than 16 to torture animals, and maybe nobody realized back then or nobody cared. So if any children in your own life ever start to show signs of animal torture or abuse, it may be a good idea to get them some help, because if you just leave it alone, they may end up on the naughty list, if you know what I mean. That's just my opinion. Also, whose dream job is it to be at a slaughterhouse at 16? Like, whose dream job is it to cut out internal organs of animals? Okay, Katherine, like that's real special. There's apparently a true crime book called Bloodstain, in which journalist Peter Lalor wrote that Katherine loved her first job so much that she ended up hanging her first set of butcher's knives over her bed, just in case she ever wanted to use them. If you already know where this is leading, then this is creepy as fuck. While Katherine was working her dream job at the slaughterhouse, she met a man named David Kellett. He was said to be a raging alcoholic, just like her father, but David was also prone to fighting while he was drunk. Because Katherine was used to this kind of violence, she had actually surprised David one day when she jumped into one of his drunken scuffles. In 1974, Katherine convinced David to marry her. It said they were completely sloshed the entire wedding, and they had actually shown up on a motorcycle, so drinking and driving, don't do it. Apparently, Katherine's mother even warned David that day that her daughter had a nasty temper. When David retold what her mother had told him, this is what he said, quote, "The old girl said to me to watch out. You better watch this one or she'll fucking kill you. Stir her up the wrong way or do the wrong thing and you're fucked. Don't ever think of playing up on her. She'll fucking kill you." Then he went on to say, and that was her mother talking. "She told me she's got something loose. She's got a screw loose somewhere." I'm sorry, but for your own mother to have to warn your new husband like that, like it's funny but not funny at all. But when your mom even knows that there's something wrong with you, a screw loose, to where she's like warning your new husband, basically, if you make any kind of a mistake, you're dead. That's just terrifying. But also, if her mom knew that there was something wrong with her or something going on with her, why did she not try to get her any help? Maybe, this is just my opinion, but maybe she was just, so caught up in her own problems and abuse and stuff that she just didn't even have time to help poor Katherine, which is absolutely awful. It's okay to feel bad for people and hate them at the same time. I often find that the younger versions of these killers, their stories are just sad, and it doesn't excuse what they do in any way, but I'm always curious about the psychology of why people do the things they do, and this is something that you see a lot, is that the people come from an abusive household, so be good to your kids. So on their wedding night, Katherine and David consummated their marriage 3 separate times. That's a lot, but good for them. It said that Katherine wanted to go for round 4, but that David was exhausted and had fallen asleep. Which makes sense if you have been wasted all day long on your wedding day and then already had sex 3 times. I need that kind of energy. Well, it apparently pissed Katherine off when she could not get round 4 going, so she started to strangle David. Yikes, right out of the gate, I guess. Her mom was not joking, apparently. So David obviously wakes up and he was able to fight Katherine off, and although she attempted to murder him on their wedding night, their marriage actually lasted for 10 years. It was said that there was an incident where Katherine was very pregnant and she burned all of David's clothing and shoes, and then she proceeded to strike him on the back of the head with a frying pan. It said all of this was in reaction to the fact that David had gotten home late from darts, a competition he was in, because he had actually made the finals. David was able to flee the house before he collapsed into the neighbor's house. Later, it said he was treated for a badly fractured skull. I guess the police wanted to charge Katherine, but she was able to talk David into dropping the charges. That is a mistake, in my opinion. It was not a perfect marriage, to say the least. In May of 1976, shortly after Katherine gave birth to their first daughter, David had left Katherine for another woman. Katherine, of course, responded to this with violence. Big surprise. She was seen the next day... Oh, this makes me sick. Okay. She was seen the next day violently pushing her daughter in a stroller and swinging her baby girl from side to side down a busy street, which is just horrific. So at this time, Katherine was admitted to a hospital called St. Elmo's, great name, and she was actually diagnosed with postpartum depression. After being treated for a few weeks, she was released. After Katherine was released, she had learned that David was unfaithful, which one report said that he was unfaithful often throughout their relationship. I'm not sure how accurate that is. It was just one of the reports, but I found it interesting. When Katherine learned of his affairs, this is a trigger warning, this part is very scary. She placed their 2-month-old infant on some train tracks nearby right before the train was due to come. And apparently she just left the baby there, which, this sick, twisted bitch, I swear. Luckily, a local man that was known in the area as Old Ted was foraging near that train track and found and rescued the baby girl just minutes before the train passed. It was said that at this time, Katherine had stolen an axe and threatened to kill several people in town. It just sounds like such an old-fashioned Western movie. Like, who steals an axe? First of all, where are there axes being sold at this time where you could just walk in and steal one? And also, who are the people that she's threatening? Are they just random people? Is she just like terrorizing this town after putting her baby on the train tracks? Like, holy crap, this woman needs some help. So I guess Katherine was then arrested and taken again to St. Elmo's Hospital, where she quote-unquote recovered and signed herself out the next day. What did she recover from? Her murderous tendencies, like in one night? All right, Katherine. Yeah. So a few days after getting out of the hospital, she apparently slashes a woman in the face and demanded that she be driven to find David. The woman complied with Katherine's request, of course, because Katherine's holding her at knife point. But during the trip, the woman was able to escape when they had stopped at a gas station. But by the time the police had arrived, Katherine had already grabbed a little boy, taken him hostage, and was threatening this poor little boy with a knife. Police were able to disarm Katherine when they attacked her with brooms, and at this point, she was admitted to the Morisset Psychiatric Hospital. I found it funny and not funny, but funny that it had said that the police had, were able to attack her with brooms. Why? They have guns, right? Like, what? Or a taser. Or maybe it's because she was holding the boy. They didn't want to point a gun at him. I don't know. I wasn't there, but it was just funny, not funny to me that she was attacked with brooms. A literal witch. It was during this stay at the hospital that sources say she allegedly told nurses there that she had intentions to commit murder. She said she wanted to kill the mechanic who had fixed her husband David's car because she thought that he was the reason that it was possible for him to leave her. She then said that she planned on also killing her mother-in-law and David himself. I feel like at this point, let out of the hospital, right? Like, someone is confessing their intentions to you about murdering multiple people, and the hospitals are like, it's fine, you can go. What the hell? This woman's clearly not okay. Either way, she was released, and despite her intentions, David and his mother quickly came to Katherine's aid, and David took Katherine back at this point. I just don't understand the deal with this woman. I just have so many questions. I really do. I just don't understand why someone would take her back. It said she was released on August 9th, 1976, into the care of her mother-in-law and David. On March 6th, 1980, David and Katherine had another daughter. In 1984, Katherine left David and moved in with her own parents, but later she was able to rent her own house. There was conflicting reports because one said that she left him and the other said that he left her. So I'm not really sure which way it actually happened, but either way they split. Although Katherine had returned to work at the slaughterhouse, she apparently hurt her back the next year and needed to go on disability pension. It said that after Katherine and David split, that Katherine went through a deep depression, which, I would not want to know what that looks like. Like, if this is her normal, what does that look like? In 1986, 2 years after Katherine and David split, Katherine jumped into a, quote, a whirlwind romance with a man named David Saunders, who was a local miner. After just a few months of dating him, her new fling moved in with Katherine and her girls. But apparently this new David had kept his apartment, probably just in case, which makes sense because they've only been dating a few months. But Katherine didn't like this. She was incredibly suspicious and jealous of what this new boyfriend could be doing while he was away from her. If her ex-boyfriend had an affair, or her ex-husband, I should say, this is something that takes people a long time to get over. I understand. And if your relationships are very toxic, they can go sideways very quickly. It said, just like her previous relationships, that this one ended up being very toxic and violent, There was one point where Katherine wanted to show, oh, this part's awful, trigger warning. Katherine wanted to show her new boyfriend what she was capable of if he should ever decide to cheat on her. And she did this by slitting the throat of his 2-month-old, quote, dingo puppy right in front of him, and then knocked him out with a frying pan. What is it with this woman and the frying pans? And why the puppy? What did the puppy do? She's so disgusting. But on a quick side note, the word dingo just made my whole day. But yeah, she apparently thought that was a good idea, I guess. So after this, they stayed together, and about a year later, in June of 1988, they had a daughter together. Sources said that this new David put down a deposit on a house for the family, and then Katherine paid the house off with her workers' compensation, which came through for her in 1989. It said that Katherine decorated the house for the family with, quote, animal skins, skulls, horns, rusty animal traps, leather jackets, old boots, machetes, rakes, and pitchforks. No space, including the ceilings, was left uncovered. End quote. That is a choice of decor. Holy crap. That is terrifying for children in the house. Rusty animal traps? Like, what happens if your kid touches one? And even if they're on the ceiling away from the kids, what happens if one falls? Like, holy crap. This is just, it's terrifying. Not long after their daughter was born, David Saunders left Katherine because they had apparently gotten into an argument where she hit him in the face with an iron and then proceeded to stab him in the stomach with a pair of scissors. The level that this woman goes to in a fit of rage is absolutely chilling. She's been in and out of a mental hospital. Why are her kids not being taken away from her at this point? Like, for their own safety. I have some big feelings about this woman being a mother. So after the new David had left, Katherine had met a new man named John Chillingworth. Great name. Katherine and John stayed together for 3 years and ended up having a son together named Eric. This was her only son. There weren't any violent incidences that were reported during their relationship, but that does not necessarily mean there weren't any. Their relationship ended after John learned that Katherine was having an affair with a man named John Charles Thomas Price. I just have to point out, because I found this so weird, that she was with a David, and then she found a new David, and now she's with a John, and then she just finds a new John. It's weird. The beginning of Katherine and John Pierce's romance was smooth sailing without any incidences. John had 3 kids. The youngest child lived with their mother, but the older 2 kids lived with John, and both of them seemed to like Katherine. Surprising. It was said that John made enough money as a minor to keep Katherine happy and comfortable. In 1995, they had moved in together, and so far it had been going well for him. But we know how that goes, don't we? I guess at some point, Katherine has suggested to John that they should get married, and John turned her down. At this point, Katherine became violent. Do you think that she was just doing her best behavior in front of John and trying not to let out her crazy until they got married so she could lock down that money? Or do you think that she was just okay for a while? I was very curious. I think she was hiding her crazy. That's just my opinion. So at the point that John turned her down about getting married, she went to frame John for stealing things from his company, and in turn, his company fired him. Why would you do that? It makes no sense to me. I'm just going to get back at you for not wanting to marry me by getting you fired? Yeah, that's going to make him want to stay with you, Katherine. That's just so dumb. And poor John. So I read how she framed him was that he had taken things that the company was going to throw away. And I guess he figured, if they're just going to throw them away anyways, he could just take them home and use them. I'm assuming that it was just tools and stuff because he was a minor, but that's just my guess. But I guess Katherine allegedly framed him and sent pictures of the things that he had taken from the trash or whatever, and this is why the company fired him. I don't think that they knew that they were marked for the trash, or maybe they did and they just didn't care. Either way, he was fired, but it's just so sad. I guess at this point, John kicked Katherine out and broke it off with her, but of course, because she's apparently just the best weasel in the world, she wormed her way back into his life, and within a few months, they were once again seeing each other. However, this time, John did not let her move back in. Good for him. Now, according to their neighbors and their friends, this is when Katherine's violence began to escalate. Okay, so February of 2000, an argument broke out between Katherine and John, and apparently Katherine tried to stab him in the chest. This is when John would take out a restraining order against her, because he wanted to keep his kids safe, John started to let people in on what was actually going on in his house and in his life. He was actually concerned for his own safety, and he had told his coworkers that if he ever didn't show up at work or ended up going missing, that it was because Katherine had killed him. That's so terrifying that he knew that something could happen to him. That shows you the level of crazy that this lady was. They begged John not to go home, but he explained to them that if he didn't go home, he was afraid that she would kill his children, which is just absolutely terrifying. Okay, this brings us to February 29th, 2000. Trigger warning, this is about to get brute. It said, John came home from work that evening, and although Katherine was not there, he had learned that she had sent the children away to sleepovers at friends' house. He then spent his evening with neighbors before he went to bed at 11 p.m. It said Katherine came home shortly after, made herself some dinner, watched a little TV. She then took a shower and went upstairs. She woke up John, they engaged in sexual activities, and then John went back to bed. After this, for reasons we don't know, Katherine took out a butcher knife from wherever she kept it next to her bed, and she proceeded to stab John 37 times. 37 times! It said that experts were able to figure out that John had woken up during the attack, but was unable to fight her off. It's super sad. Unfortunately, John succumbed to his injuries, and he died. At this point, Katherine dragged his body down the stairs, and brace yourself, it's about to get a lot worse. You've been warned. Katherine then skinned John's body and hung the skin from a meat hook in the living room. After she had skinned his body, she decapitated him, and then she dismembered him. It said she actually cut his body into pieces. She then took those pieces and cooked them with, quote, potato, pumpkin, beets, zucchini, cabbage, squash, and gravy. Oh my God, yuck, that is so disgusting. She then made a dish for herself, but later at the crime scene, they found some of the contents discarded, which led authorities to believe she couldn't finish her meal. It wasn't known if she just couldn't eat it or if she did eat it and just couldn't finish it. At some point during this horrendous evening, Katherine arranged the body with John's left arm, draping over an empty liter of soda, and had crossed his legs. At the crime scene, they had found a handwritten note with a picture of John underneath. Before I read this to you, I wanted to say that this note is so confusing and just so out there that I feel like it really shows her crazy side. And because it was written in whatever frame of mind she was in when she lashed out on John, it really sat with me just how nuts this lady is. Okay, so the note was found stained with blood, and it was covered in small pieces of flesh. The note said, quote, "Time got you back, Jonathan, for raping my daughter. You to Breck, which is John's daughter, for Ross, for Little John, which is John's son. Now play with Little John's dick, John Price." End quote. I just have all kinds of questions about this note. It seemed so manic, right? It was said at some point Katherine had left the house after she murdered John, went to an ATM, withdrew $1,000. I don't know what she was planning on doing with this money. Was she planning on running? Like, was she just out of her fucking gourd? Like, I have no idea. I just have so many questions. And you'll understand why we don't have those answers later. After this, Katherine laid down next to the headless and mutilated body of John. She took a large number of some type of pills, and then she passed out. So the next morning, the neighbor had already become concerned when John's car had not left the driveway, and when John didn't show up for work the next morning, his employer sent a coworker to check on him. The neighbor and the coworker tried to knock on John's bedroom window to wake him, but after they noticed some blood on the front door, they immediately called the police. The police shortly arrived at the awful crime scene, and it was said that they immediately detained Katherine in her comatose state. When she finally woke up, she said that she had no memory of the prior evening. At the crime scene, it said that when police entered the residence, the first cop that was in the house had pushed aside what he thought was a curtain in the living room. He then saw his arm was covered in blood, and it's then that he realized it was, quote, human pelt. In the kitchen, police had found John's head boiling in a pot of vegetables, still on the stove, and they noted that it was still warm. One source had said that while the officers were searching the crime scene, that one officer said to the other, "I'll give you one guess where the head is." Oh my God, can you imagine? I can't even imagine seeing that crime scene. Oh, that must have been just so traumatizing for those people. I hope that police officers are given help after stuff like this. Police also found 2 full plates with little labels on them. The police were absolutely horrified when they realized that Katherine had planned to serve John's body to his own children. Oh my God, this crazy ass bitch. Can you imagine sitting down with your dad's girlfriend and like halfway through the meal, she's like, "Oh, by the way, the reason that your dad's not here, yeah, it's because you're eating him right now." Oh my God, the horror. She still claims to have no recollection of the night of the murder, but in spite of that, she was still charged with the murder of John Price. So, as for Katherine's trial, it was said that her initial offer to plead guilty to manslaughter was rejected, and in 2001, she was arraigned and was charged with John's murder, to which she entered the plea of not guilty. Yeah, she really thought that she was going to get away with pleading guilty to manslaughter for what she did. That's nuts. No freaking way. In October of 2001, her trial had started, but it didn't last very long. So I guess in the beginning, Justice Barry O'Keefe, which is equivalent to a judge in the U.S., told the 60 jury prospects that they could excuse themselves due to the nature of the photographic evidence, and apparently 5 of them accepted that offer. Also, when the witness list was read out loud, apparently 5 jury prospects. Then when the witness list was read out to the jury prospects, several more of them dropped out, to which the jury was then impaneled, which means it was selected finally. After this, Katherine's attorney talked to the judge, and he actually adjourned until the following day. The next morning, Katherine had, for unclear reasons, changed her plea to guilty without ever hearing any testimony. The jury was dismissed, and it became public knowledge that the judge had been advised that she was actually changing her plea the day before. When he adjourned trial that day, he actually had ordered a psychiatric assessment overnight for Katherine to determine whether she could even understand the consequences of what it meant to change her plea to guilty. I guess the judge said, this was a quote, "The last minutes of his," meaning John Price, "life must have been a time of abject terror for him, as they were a time of utter enjoyment for her. She has not expressed any contrition or remorse, and if released, she poses a serious threat to the security of society." He then sentenced her to life in prison and marked it with "never to be released." Good. Finally. So sad that it had to come to this before that. It's just crazy that she was finally put away, but it had to come to all of this before. I feel like there could have been things done before, and maybe it wouldn't have went this way, which is just awful to think. Katherine is currently serving a life sentence at the Silverwater Women's Correctional Center. It said that she was the first Australian woman to be sentenced to life, and that had the mark of never to be released. I've heard, correct me if I'm wrong, Australia, but I've heard that in Australia they take a little bit more lenience over there. They're a little bit more lenient over there than, say, the US, but I've heard that they're more about rehabilitating people instead of incarcerating people. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that's interesting to me that she was put away for life. So she's tried to appeal her sentence, but it was denied almost immediately. The judges that heard her appeal said, quote, "This was an appalling crime, almost beyond contemplation in a civilized society," end quote. I'm so glad that they denied her. She does not deserve to be a part of society. She had her chance. Goodbye. And that, my friends, is the horrible, awful, gruesome case of Katherine Knight. Killer, cannibal, and straight up nutbag. I hope her kids are doing all right. I hope that John's kids are doing all right. I am not going to make it a habit to research any of the children in the cases that I research, because, like, if I see the information about the kids and it's just kind of left over and it's in the story and it's just like a word or two of maybe what they went on to do or whatever, I might include it. But I refuse to research into their lives any here on the channel, because I just feel like they've been traumatized enough. Maybe they've even been harassed. They've obviously put into the public eye, and it wasn't their choice. So I feel like we should all just leave them alone, respect their privacy. Like they've just been through enough at this point. In fact, except for the note, I didn't include her kids' name for that reason. I only gave the names of his children when the note came because it was part of the case. This is one of those cases that I feel like, unfortunately, her crimes could have been prevented. Maybe, and this is just my opinion, but if any of the men in her life were able to have allowed the police to charge her because she had harassed and abused them. And I feel like maybe, I'm not victim shaming at all, but maybe she could have been behind bars like a long time ago. I'm sure that it would have been hard for the men that she victimized to come forward about her abuse. But let me tell you what, men are victims too, not just women. I don't like that stigma that surrounds men being victims to women's abuse just because we're seen as a smaller, weaker sex, because it just does not matter. Abuse is abuse, and women are sometimes just as nasty as men, and this case shows you just how awful women can be. So I'm going to post pictures of Katherine and John on the Kill Files socials. Tell me what you think of how she looks. Does she have what some people call, like, quote-unquote dead eyes? Like, does she look like a psychopath, or do you think she looks normal? I'll tell you that after you know the story, she looks creepy as fuck, but I want to know, in your honest opinion, what do you think about the way she looks? And poor John, like, his face, he just looks like a normal, nice guy, and it just kills me that he was taken away from his kids and that this woman did so much to so many people and just traumatized them, and I'm so glad that she's behind bars. You don't deserve to be out. You're a piece of shit. Goodbye. Well, that's it for today, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today and listening to another episode of The Kill File. If you want to share your thoughts on what we covered today, suggest a case for me to check out, or if you're just bored and looking for something to do, you can head over to The Kill File's social medias and reach out. We're on Facebook and Instagram as The Kill File, and we're on YouTube and TikTok as The Kill File Podcast. Also, feel free to check out our website at thekillfile.com, where you can learn more about me, your host, and a little bit more about how The Kill File got started. I love hearing from you guys. Come back on Mondays, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts, when we will cover another case on The Kill File, where nothing stays buried forever. Stay safe, you guys. Bye!